Welcome to Victor Narrates Reddit. Like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. Tell us where you're watching from in the comments. Now, let's begin. Hindsight is 100%. I suppose I should have been on my guard when my wife first came home from her job at the art gallery, beaming with joy about a new patron. But when you completely trust someone and they have never, not even once in 17 years together, given you the slightest problem, you initially want to give them some leeway. My initial assumption was wrong, very wrong. I'm Bobby Spra, and my wife is Tracy. We met at a small university in the Midwest 18 years ago. We started dating 18 years ago and got married 16 years ago. We had a daughter 14 years ago and a son 12 years ago. I work as a programmer for a government agency. I make good money, but not great. I earned enough for Tracy to be a stay-at-home mom while the kids were young. But 2 years ago, she decided the kids were old enough for her to spread her wings, and she got a job at a high-end art gallery in the city with a 30-hour workweek. She had studied art in college, so the job didn't challenge Tracy intellectually in the slightest. She could talk and walk the gallery, mainly guiding clients who were a bit better off financially than us. We live in a large Midwestern city, and there were enough people in that financial position for the gallery to do a pretty substantial business. As a perk of her job, Tracy could socialize with these people and briefly immerse herself in their world before returning to her regular life. Occasionally, we both would. She would work at a large gallery exhibition, and I had to accompany her as a guest. I must admit, it was exciting to spend a few hours in the company of movers and shakers. Computer geeks like me don't usually get the chance to mingle with CEOs, politicians, lawyers, and bank presidents. From time to time, Tracy would come home drunk after meeting some celebrity or influential person. My kids and I would marvel as she just let herself go for a while, and then she would push us away, often leaving me to endure her sarcastic comments about our lives for the rest of the night. Most of the time, I didn't take it personally. As for me, I was in the garage tinkering with the car. For the past few weeks, Tracy had been almost overflowing with enthusiasm about some brilliant real estate agent who had recently become a patron of the gallery. According to Tracy, Jackson Alloys Furchel, a 28-year-old millionaire, had recently moved into a new, expensive house and wanted works of art to adorn its walls and reflect his station in life. In general, she was impressed with him, although she expressed the opinion that he also seemed somewhat self-absorbed. In several conversations, she noted that he was handsome, well-built, and often mentioned that he practiced various physical activities like cycling and rock climbing. Tracy was boasting about her new patron, so I ignored it and let her get on with it. Over the next 2 weeks, as I expected, things calmed down, and I never heard another word about Jackson Alloys Furchel until I met him at the gallery's Christmas gala a few weeks before the holidays. I have to admit, he was an impressive physical specimen, 190 pounds, and looking solid in his expensive Armani suit. He also had blonde hair, blue eyes, and was extremely handsome, even from my perspective. I didn't expect such a thing. I spoke with him for about 30 seconds while Tracy introduced us, and in that time, I saw him look my wife up and down like a tiger sizing up its prey. Yes, she was beautiful that night in her blue skirt and jacket, with a hint of cleavage peeking out from under her white blouse. But his gaze was more leering than admiring. Tracy seemed too busy with everything going on to pay attention, but I did. Tracy went to socialize, and I headed to the bar. I had a Jack Daniels on the rocks and found Kenny Taylor, the husband of one of my wife's co-workers, whom I had met before and got along with very well. We talk a lot about sports and cars. I talked with Kenny for a while, and then socialized a bit myself. After about an hour, I noticed Tracy talking in a small group of people, and Jackson Alloys Furchel was completely wrapped around her. I went to the bar, got her usual drink, a Riesling, and approached the group. I introduced myself, then handed Tracy her glass of wine. Then I calmly reached around to Tracy's right hip and moved Jackson's hand, which was resting there on her back, away. He didn't say a word, just smiled as he brought his hand back to his body. I chatted with the group for a few minutes. Then Tracy left to socialize, and I headed in another direction, making sure Jackson wasn't following her. I expected to see Tracy minding her own business as I moved around, socializing with some of her coworkers, but after about an hour, I didn't see my wife anywhere. Looking around a second time, I didn't see Jackson either. My spidey sense went off, and I made a concerted effort to find Tracy. Not finding her in the gallery, I went out the front door and began to circle the building. There were small groups of people in coats standing in the parking lot, talking, apparently about to leave, but Tracy was still missing. Just then, I noticed a couple cuddling in a black Jaguar XJ. The car was running, and the couple was sitting, embracing in the back seat. I didn't bother to check if it was Tracy and Jackson. I decided it was. I walked over to the car and opened the door next to the woman. The occupants pulled back, so all I could ascertain was that they were, if not kissing, then close to it. "It's time to get out of here now," I said in my most polite but firm tone. "We were just—" Tracy stammered as Jackson smirked. "I don't care. It's time to go," I said in a low but firm voice. "Really, Bobby, you have to come and listen to this sound system," Jackson said. "It's absolutely crystal clear." The stereo was on, playing concert music, but I don't think either of them was listening to music. Another time, "Jackson, we really should be going," I said in my most casual voice. I pulled my wife out of the car, and we walked towards where my Ford F-150 was parked. "Wait, I can't leave. The party still has 2 hours to go. I have to stay the whole time and be one of the hosts," Tracy said with insistence in her voice. "If your boss has a problem with it, he can call me directly," I said. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" We were really listening to his car sound system. "It's incredible," she said with a tone of wonder in her voice. "Uh-huh," I replied, but there was no wonder in my voice. Tracy continued to feign innocence, and for the next few weeks, things were quiet between us. But eventually, I warmed up, and things returned to our normal existence. Then, a few months later, I was surprised when Tracy told me she had accepted an invitation to Jackson's lake cabin for a 4th of July weekend. It was going to be us, Tracy's boss and his wife, and 2 other married couples who were friends of Jackson's. We would leave on Friday afternoon and stay until noon on Sunday, and Jackson was going to barbecue both days with a full bar, swimming, boating, and whatever else was available. I started to protest, but Tracy just said we were doing it, turned, and walked away from me. In fact, the weekend started off great. We spent a few hours on the lake in Jackson's rather large sailboat. All the women looked great in their bikinis, and the guys didn't look too bad in their baggy trunks. To be honest, Jackson probably had the best body of the 5 guys, although fortunately, it didn't look like he was better endowed than the others. And Tracy, despite being the second oldest of the 5 women, probably had the best physique. Her black bikini showed off her 36C breasts and her round, but without revealing too much skin. Jackson had installed a great grill in the backyard of his cabin and even had a fully stocked fridge with beer, wine, and ice for mixed drinks. He brought out a variety of marinated steaks and started placing them on the grill while we all sat in chairs by the grill and drank our preferred beverages. Jackson was acting like a gracious host and so far was getting along well with Tracy, who seemed to be keeping a bit more distance from him than she had at Christmas. The evening went splendidly, and around midnight, we all dispersed to our rooms. Jackson, as a single man, went to the master bedroom alone. Saturday began with a visit to a small town adjacent to the lake. It was a little tourist trap with all sorts of cute shops, and most of the women came home with a few things. Then we had a sumptuous lunch of gyro sandwiches and played a game of volleyball. After the game ended, the libations began, and in the evening, sausages and pulled pork were grilled. We enjoyed another great dinner, and after sitting around chatting for a couple of hours, Tracy's boss, Lou, suggested that he and I take a walk around the lake. Considering everything we had eaten and drunk, I decided it was a great idea to prepare for the second round. It took us about 30 minutes to circle the lake, and when we returned, the group had moved from the table to chairs and loungers. I wasn't very happy when I saw Tracy sitting on a lounger with her back to Jackson and his arms around her waist. As we approached, Tracy smiled and got up from on top of Jackson, but she didn't seem to be in too much of a hurry, even though she must have known I wouldn't be too pleased. She never looked me in the face, but came over and sat in the chair next to me for most of the rest of the night. Several times during the evening, I caught glances between her and Jackson when they thought I wasn't looking. Like the night before, The party started to break up around midnight, but while the other three couples headed to their rooms, Tracy asked me to quietly join her in the kitchen. When we got there, she looked me straight in the eye for the first time all night and announced, "Jackson offered for me to sleep in his bed tonight." I accepted his offer. I must have blacked out and hit my head because I thought Tracy had just told me she was going to sleep with Jackson in his bed. I looked at her as if she had three eyes, and she realized I wasn't quite sure I had understood her correctly. "This has nothing to do with love. This is purely about sex, Bobby," she began. "I have been completely faithful to you for 17 years. You're the only man I love, but I want to have sex with Jackson. He turns me on, and I want to see what another man feels like. After tonight, I will go back to being your absolutely faithful wife for the rest of our lives. But I think you owe me one night." I don't know how long I stood there with my mouth open. My wife had just told me she was going to sleep with another man because she wanted to, and I owed her that. "Over my dead body will you sleep with him?" I finally muttered. "Are you so sure about that, honey?" "Remember, every action has consequences," I warned. "Damn it, Bobby," she said in a whisper. "Do you have to see everything in such black and white? It's one night, for God's sake. One night, and that's it. And you're going to ruin it for everyone. We never thought you'd be so uncooperative. I probably should have just kept my mouth shut and done it behind your back. But I was afraid that if you found out, we'd be finished. So I decided that if I told you and you let me go, it wouldn't be cheating," she explained. She half-turned and walked away. As she left the kitchen and entered the living room, I saw Tracy take Jackson's hand and head toward the master bedroom. I think the blurriness in my vision was from the tears rolling down my cheeks. I walked to the locked bar and poured myself a shot of Jack. It took me about 5 minutes to finish it, and when I did, I walked to the master bedroom and stood outside the door, very still. I could hear the sounds of two people having sex. My life as I knew it was over. I drank several shots of Jack, trying to figure out what I should do next. My first impulse was to leave and file for divorce as soon as possible, but the thought of having to give up my children most of the time kept me in check. I saw nothing good in this decision, neither for me nor for them. On the other hand, my wife was in another man's bed at this very moment, and I knew I couldn't accept it. I briefly considered setting the house on fire and killing us all, but sanity prevailed. Then I seemed to pass out for a while, because when I looked at the clock, it was 3 a.m., and everything was quiet in the house. Staggering, I went to the room Tracy and I had been assigned. The bed was made because it was empty, just as I knew it would be. I lay down directly on the covers and slept soundly for the next few hours, waking up at 7:30. I went to the adjoining bathroom, took a quick shower, and brushed my teeth before heading to the kitchen. 3 other couples were already awake and having breakfast of scrambled eggs and bacon. Marn, Tracy's boss's wife, was clearly the head cook and offered me a plate while the others murmured their good mornings. I could tell by the way they all looked at me out of the corner of their eyes that they were well aware of what had happened. I know my face turned red and flushed because the level of humiliation was unbearable. "It's okay, Bobby. We've all seen it before," Marn said sympathetically, and the others nodded in agreement. "Jackson has done this 3 or 4 other times. He's an alpha male, and when he sees something he wants, he goes after it. That's just how he is. I'm also inclined to think he really enjoys the humiliation, and I think the women fall for it too," added Lou. "But I don't think there's anything personal in it. It's just the way he is," she concluded. "So what happened to the other couples he did this to?" I asked. "As far as I know, they're still married. It's a bit silly to break up a long-standing marriage over a one-night stand if you think about it," Marn said. "Especially with kids and all," added Joanna, one of the other wives. "You mean he's looking for married women with children so the wives can use the kids as leverage for an affair?" I asked incredulously. "I guess so," intervened Ralph, Joanna's husband. "But he's actually a good guy, except for this one little detail. I've known him since college, and if you're his friend, you're a friend for life. So I can forgive him that detail, especially since it doesn't harm the couple in the long run. In fact, I know that last year, Jackson convinced his latest conquest and her husband to buy a condo in North Carolina, and Jackson stays with them whenever he's in the area. At that moment, We heard moans coming from the master bedroom. It was Tracy, and I could tell from the sounds that last night's tryst with Jackson obviously included this morning. Everyone at the table blushed with embarrassment, and I turned white with rage. "Why don't we finish breakfast on the deck?" Martin suggested. Tracy and Jackson joined us on the deck about 30 minutes later, a radiant beauty who didn't seem too concerned that everyone knew what she had just done. She had a plate of breakfast in her hands and immediately went to the lounger where I was sitting and sat on the edge as I rearranged my legs for her. At this point, her back was to me, but I could see the redness on her back from behind her tank top. I could also make out the bite mark on her right shoulder, just below the straps of her tank top and bra. She didn't greet me with anything more than a nod as she sat down, and I saw no reason to break the silence. "So, what are everyone's plans for the afternoon?" Jackson said in his welcoming host voice. "I think we should go back and let the kids spend some time with us after lunch. Don't you think, honey?" I said toward Tracy's back. She hesitated for a second, and from the way her hair and head moved, I could tell she was rolling her eyes at me. One of those things you notice when you've been together as long as we have. As she was sitting facing the others, they could all see her roll her eyes, and it took a lot of effort for me not to raise my hand and smack her on the deceitful back of her neck. "I was hoping we'd be here for a while longer and maybe go sailing again, dear," she replied coldly. "No, we definitely have to go back. Finish your breakfast. I'll get the car ready by 10, I said, heading back into the house. I loaded the car in record time. Tracy was finishing breakfast when I returned to the deck. I grabbed her wrist, waved a hasty goodbye to the rest of the group, and practically dragged Tracy to the car. I didn't need to look anyone in the eye to know what they were thinking. I knew because I'd already thought it. We drove in silence for the first 45 minutes, except for the radio being on, and Tracy mostly looked out the passenger window. I think she was afraid that if she looked straight ahead and I saw her face, an explosion would start. So she just looked away. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "Was it worth it?" I asked, half whispering, half talking to her. She didn't move for a couple of seconds. Then I saw her take a deep breath. She turned to me. Yes, it was wonderful," she said, looking somewhere in the distance. Not exactly the answer I was expecting. I didn't know what to expect, but I didn't think she would tell me the terrible truth. Maybe I expected some stammering, some truth, a lot of backtracking, maybe an apology, but not the whole truth. And from the look on her face, I could tell it was the truth. 17 years, 2 children, everything we've built together, and all that in one night? I asked. She turned slightly towards me in her seat and looked at me with a sad, almost resigned expression. "It's up to you, Bobby," she said. "As I promised you, it was just once, and now I will be yours as devotedly as I was before last night. It was an incredible night, and now it's over. But if you can lose your love for me so quickly and destroy our family, then you're doing what you have to do. But believe me, I'll take the kids, and I'll make sure they know that you destroyed our family." I was stunned into silence. Not even an apology, and she was blaming me for the breakup of our family. She and Jackson had surely planned it well. I had never seen Tracy like this before, and I definitely didn't like it. So can I assume that this morning session with Jackson was designed to humiliate me? I asked. Not exactly. He wanted to have one more time before I become my husband's faithful wife. He's willing to live by my rules, she explained. We stopped at a relative's house to pick up the kids. When we arrived, Tracy acted as if nothing had changed. Although I got along very well with Tracy's parents, Ron and Judy, I could barely look them in the eye. I felt that somehow they knew Tracy had been unfaithful, and I felt ashamed and humiliated. I wanted to scream the truth about their daughter, but I knew that wasn't the time or place. The whole time we were there, Tracy had a puzzled look on her face. She was definitely enjoying my discomfort and the fact that she had the upper hand. I thought to myself that this was definitely not the right way to make amends. At the end of the night, Tracy got into bed after me. I lay there watching her, and she climbed on top of me and settled behind me like a spoon. "Not today," I said. "There is absolutely nothing you can do to get me aroused for you. You'll have to make do with what you got last night and this morning." For the first time since Saturday night, Tracy showed weakness. She looked hurt and surprised that I had rejected her advances in one of our few moments together. "But don't you desire me?" Jackson says that's almost an automatic response from men in situations like this. Really? So not only is he a real estate genius, but also a sex therapist? Then he should have warned you that some men don't see what you did as a sexual challenge. Some of us see it as a total betrayal, and vomiting might be more appropriate than sex. Tracy's eyes opened even wider than they had been in all our 17 years together. I had never spoken to her like that, and I had never cursed at her. I turned over onto my back and pretended to fall asleep. I could hear her crying softly. I didn't care. I made an appointment with a reputable divorce lawyer for the following week. The meeting did not go well, to say the least. Marcus Rastan had to explain to me twice that my options really came down to giving up half of my assets and the children, or waiting for the sake of the children, and then giving up half of my assets if we divorced when they were adults. We all know parents who live their lives for their children, and then when the children leave home, the parents no longer have anything in common and get divorced. That is exactly the scenario my lawyer described to me. Be a super dad for the next 6 years, and then divorce Tracy once the children were no longer an issue. At least in my case, I didn't have to worry about Tracy hitting the streets if she was telling me the truth about keeping her promise. This is what I did. If my children were involved in an activity, I was generally the responsible parent, and I made sure Tracy was also involved. Why should I be the only one sitting at a fundraiser for the Stamp Club or working on a carpentry project? We were the parents everyone looks at and shakes their head at. Physically, I didn't touch Tracy sexually for 6 months until she told me she would have to start leaving the house if I didn't want to fulfill my marital duties. As I was ready to sow my own oats, I literally managed to indoctrinate myself into thinking I could have sex with Tracy in the same way she had with Jackson. Just sex and nothing more. After all, she was still a beautiful woman. I wasn't being forced to have sex with a troll. It wasn't pretty, but our first night together set the tone for what was to come in the following years. We had a date night at one of our favorite Italian establishments, and I served Tracy 2 more glasses of wine than usual. "Where did that come from?" she asked me in a whisper. "Holy cow, Bobby, do I really have to wait another 6 months for a repeat?" I couldn't answer that question, so I said nothing and held her from behind. It's true that every time I remembered Tracy with Jackson, I shuddered, and there was nothing tender about our lovemaking. Although she seemed to enjoy it, she never complained, even though we rarely hugged or spoke softly afterward as we used to before that time. Everything seemed to be back to normal, but every week I had a private investigator come to make sure she was keeping her word with me and wasn't seeing Jackson or anyone else. I spent a lot of money to get some peace of mind. 6 years later, our youngest son, Terry, went off to college at Michigan State. Melissa was already at Michigan State, so when Terry made his decision, we had a little war between the kids all summer before they both left for their respective schools. Since Terry was just a freshman, he lived in a dorm on campus, and Tracy and I helped him move in the week before school started. Neither Tracy nor I remember taking half the things Terry brought with him. We took him to Michigan State on Thursday and stayed for most of the weekend, leaving for home late on Sunday night. Exactly 30 days later, on a Tuesday afternoon, I called both kids on the phone and told them in a low, calm voice that I was going to divorce their mother because she had cheated on me with another man a few years earlier. They were both devastated. "I thought you two were so good together. How could this have happened?" Melissa almost shouted into the phone. "I always thought we were good together too, but your mother cheated on me with Jackson Alloys virtual 6 years ago when we went there with other couples for a 4th of July weekend. She told me she was going to do it first so as not to go behind my back. And then she declared that she would remain faithful to me for the rest of our lives together. She didn't see it as cheating, but I did. And then I told her I wasn't going to put up with it, that there would be consequences if she did it, but apparently she and Jackson had planned it. And she told me that if I left her, not only would she get half of our things, but she would also get you too and turn you against me. I couldn't lose you both too, so I capitulated and just endured it until you reached the age of majority, and I was sure you would understand." Terry spoke first. "Wow," he exclaimed. "Did she give you any reason for doing this, other than the fact that she just wanted to have sex with a man she thought was hot?" "It wasn't a big deal. She just thought I would give in so as not to lose you too, and in a way, she was right." "Dad, did she sleep around on you?" Melissa asked. Not that I can tell, honey, I replied. I've had a private investigator following her 1 week a month ever since. And according to him, she's kept her promise and hasn't made any mistakes. So why can't you forgive her? Terry asked doubtfully. You've been married for 22 years, and she's only done it once. Once was more than enough. Terry, I said, try to contain my growing anger. What love did she have for me when she spent the night in another man's bed? What respect did she show me when she had sex with him the next morning, and we all heard the two of them doing it together? Forgive me, kids. I don't have the strength to forgive her. I stayed with her to keep the family together. I love you guys. Thanks, Dad. We really appreciate you keeping things together for us, Melissa replied. Does she know yet? Terry asked. She'll know in a few minutes. They're serving her at 4 o'clock in her office, I said. Oh, Dad, bad move, Melissa said. In front of her boss and co-workers? She'll be devastated and humiliated. Don't do that to her, Dad. It's too late, honey. Besides, I planned it that way on purpose. Her boss and his wife were among those at the lake house when it all happened, and if you think I wasn't humiliated enough by that. Imagine how I felt when your mother started moaning during sex with Jackson the next morning. I want her to crawl into a hole and die. So no, I really want her to feel the pain of humiliation. Even if I don't agree with it, Dad, I guess I understand. I'm with you, Dad. I've got your back completely, Terry repeated. My cell phone rang at 4:07. Yes, I answered. I'm on my way home, you bastard, and when I get there, I'm going to kick you in the balls until next week, Tracy screamed into the phone. I'll bet on remorse and tears, just to show you what I know, I replied before ending the call. I sat in the living room watching ESPN until I heard the garage door open and Tracy's car pull in. I turned off the TV and stood up. If she was going to attack me, I wanted to be able to defend myself. Up to this point, I had never hit a woman, but I would if necessary. As usual, Tracy came in through the back room and seemed to be fuming. She walked straight towards me until I turned slightly to the right, so she couldn't kick me in the groin with her dominant right foot. It's an old wrestling move. I also raised both hands in a defensive posture. At this point, Tracy stopped, looked me up and down as if she were thinking of a way to hit me, and then collapsed onto the sofa, sobbing. I thought we were okay, she murmured. In all these years, you never once mentioned divorcing me. You were okay, so you thought we were okay, I said calmly. But I kept my promise to you. I haven't slept with anyone since Jackson at the lake, and I wasn't going to sleep with anyone else. You kept your promise, but 16 years before that, you made a vow to me that you just threw in the trash that night. I asked you not to do it, but you were going to do it anyway, and you threatened me with taking my children. I couldn't let you do that. For me, her presence simply completed the circle you started at the lake house 6 years ago. As for cruelty, your Sunday morning with all of us in the house was the most humiliating moment of my life. You can be sure that I got my revenge. Tracy continued to sob, but I saw a flash of recognition on her face. 6 years ago, you told me your night with Jackson Alloys Virtual was worth it, that it was wonderful. Do you still think so? But I kept my promise. I have been completely faithful to you since then. For over 6 years, she sobbed. So how long is your promise good for? I replied quickly. If your vow is only valid for 16 years, your promise is valid for half that time. Let's say 8 years. Bobby, I'm sorry if this incident is the reason we're getting divorced, but I told you I didn't cheat, Tracy said. Yes, you did. I insisted. Just because you told me beforehand instead of sneaking behind my back doesn't make it right. We didn't discuss it. You, and he didn't agree on it. You, and he did. And then you broke your vows to me. You regret the divorce it led to, but you don't regret the act. You never regretted the action. I didn't give you a license. We didn't reach some agreement for you to have a pass. You just gave it to yourself and thought I would accept your stupid decision. You tore my heart out that weekend, Tracy, and on the way home. You told me it was my problem and I had to deal with it, or you would take my children. Does that sound loving to you? Because it certainly doesn't to me. I concluded. She just looked at me, stunned. Tracy got a good lawyer, and he convinced the judge that we needed to go to couple therapy. In the first session, the counselor, a pretty young woman in her 30s, asked me why I thought I couldn't get over Tracy's infidelity, especially since she didn't go behind my back to sleep with Jackson. I looked at her as if she had two heads, then asked her if she had ever been married, not noticing the ring on her left hand. My marital status has nothing to do with your answer, Mr. Spragg, she said, a bit defensively. Wrong answer, I said, getting up to leave. Both women stood motionless as I walked away. Later that night, I received a call from Ron and Judy, Tracy's parents. I love Tracy's parents very much. My own parents died a few years ago, and since their death, I've grown even closer to Ron and Judy. They reciprocated wholeheartedly, but I knew they had to be on their daughter's side in this case. That's what parents do. I hadn't spoken to them since Tracy was served a few weeks ago. Both were on the line on speakerphone. Judy started the conversation after the greetings. Bob, why are you being so stubborn? She said. You know Tracy loves you with all her heart. You know she kept her promise to you not to have sex with anyone else ever again. So why are you being so uncooperative? What exactly did she tell you about that weekend? Well, honey, she told us that you two talked about her having sex with some guy for one night, and then she promised she would be faithful to you forever. She told us she told you, not going behind your back like she could have because she really loves you and doesn't want to lose you. Judy explained. That's about half the story, Mom. Are you two sitting down? I asked. Say what you have to say, Bobby. We're sitting, her father replied brusquely. We didn't talk about her having sex with Jackson Aloys Furchel. She and Jackson talked. I was told I had no say in the matter, that it was going to happen, and if I wanted to make a fuss, she would take the kids and turn them against me. I warned her not to do it, but it made no difference. So they had their fun that night. And just to be sure, they had fun again that morning when everyone was in the house until your daughter got too loud and we went to the backyard. I have never been so humiliated in my life. And on the way home, Tracy told me how great the sex was. Does that sound like a loving wife? Does that sound like someone who really cares about her husband? Not to me. But you stayed with her for another 6 years, her father asked. No, I stayed with my children for another 6 years. But the love began to die that night and continues to die more and more every day. I will never love her the way I used to, I said. I heard Judy crying. I'm sorry, son. We didn't know the whole story, Ron said. We should have realized it had to be worse for you to just walk away. Thank you for staying all these years for the children. Tracy and her lawyer did everything they could to delay the process, and the divorce took about a year. I don't know. Maybe Tracy thought I would lose the will to fight and just stay married. She must have known that wasn't going to happen. Although I didn't understand it at the time, being an involved father while my children were growing up helped my social standing a lot, and it also gave me insight into the personal lives of some other parents. I met many more divorced people in my age group than I usually do, and I used that knowledge to my advantage. When my divorce finally became official, I took day trips or went to restaurants and dance clubs on weekends, and I almost always had an interesting conversation partner. Many of them were divorced mothers of friends of my children's friends, and others were friends of friends. I guess the old adage that everything is out there if one wants to look for it turned out to be true. I had sex more often and with more partners than before I was married. Life wasn't bad if you ignored the void in my heart that Tracy had created. After the divorce, I moved into a 3-bedroom apartment because I wanted my children to have a place where they could stay with me if they wished. I know they were angry with Tracy at first after the divorce, but I figured they would eventually get over it and maybe split their time between the two of us until they settled down permanently. For their sake, I hoped she and Tracy would come to some sort of agreement, but I wasn't going to be the middleman in that deal. Tracy had done bad things to all 3 of us, and I wasn't going to try to facilitate her return to the children's lives. I wasn't surprised that both children chose to live with me during their college breaks, but what did surprise me was how quickly her parents returned to the family. I heard very little from them during the process, and understandably so, but about 2 months after the divorce was finalized, Judy called me and asked if we could meet for dinner at Maggiano's, a nice Italian restaurant in our city. Considering how well we got along before the divorce, I saw no reason not to go, and the 3 of us had a great evening. The night began awkwardly as both Ron and Judy apologized for Tracy's behavior and for any animosity that might have arisen because they were supporting her, at least until they knew the rest of the story, so to speak. I told them the apology was accepted and that I understood they were supporting their daughter. Then I asked if we could change the subject, and from that moment on, the night improved despite the occasional comments and tears about what might have been. Having Ron and Judy back in my life gave me a sense of normalcy, and I think they enjoyed my company as much as I appreciated theirs. We rarely talked about Tracy, except to reminisce about some past events. We would meet maybe a couple of times a month while the kids were in school, and when they came home, we were together even more often. It was only a matter of time before I introduced a sixth person into our little gatherings. Angelica and I started dating about 18 months after the divorce. By then, I was dating, not really looking for Ms. Right. When Angelica and her friends walked into the restaurant where the kids and I were having dinner on a Saturday night, she and 3 of her friends sat across from us. And although I wasn't paying much attention to them, my kids were my first priority. "Hey, Dad, do you see those women who just sat down?" Melissa asked, panting slightly. "They all look good, and 3 of them aren't wearing wedding rings." "Jesus, Melissa, I don't need you to be my wingman," I replied. "She's right, Dad. There are some bombshells at that table," Terry added. I looked back. The kids were right. "Heck, maybe I really do need you to be my wingman," I said to Melissa. After we finished dinner, I was driving, so I gave the keys to Melissa and told the kids I would find Nuber home. Then I approached the table and introduced myself to the lovely ladies, who quickly invited me to join them while they ate. I had a shot of bourbon. "You abandoned your kids to flirt with us? What kind of father are you?" asked Jennifer, the long-haired blonde sitting at a round table, 10 o'clock for me. "I'm a father who knows his children's good taste. So when they pointed out that 3 of you weren't wearing wedding rings, I had 2 choices: go home to watch the baseball game and get a lot of crap from those same kids, or come over here, maybe make a fool of myself, but at least get more respect from the kids. And they always told me it's just as easy to love a beautiful stepmother as an ugly one," I replied. "And big guy," said the married brunette to my right. "Nothing special, just a self-confident guy with 2 bright, chatty kids and good taste. That's how the mother should be here." They all laughed, even Rose, whom I annoyed. "And for that, big guy, you have to tell your story to the class first," she replied with a smile. So I told 4 strangers a summarized version of my life, quickly recounting my previous 17-year marriage and the subsequent divorce. "That's not enough, Romeo. If you're such a good guy, how did your wife leave?" asked Angelica, the black-haired goddess. "There are 3 of us here who have been through divorce, so we want to know if we should even waste our time talking to you. Straight to the point." "I love it," I replied. For the first time since I got divorced 2 years ago, I told my whole story, even the most painful parts. Until then, only Tracy's parents and my divorce lawyer knew the whole story. When I finished my story, it became uncomfortably quiet. There were tears in everyone's eyes. Heck, I even had tears in my own eyes. "Well, that's one way to ease the tension in the room," said Carol, touching my right arm at about 4 o'clock. "I'm sorry, ladies. I try not to dwell on the past. If you look at it from the other side, I have 2 wonderful children, and my in-laws aren't bad either." "Your in-laws? I can't believe it," Angelica sighed. "Now you're crossing all the lines of my understanding. Nobody loves their in-laws that much, especially after a divorce. What can I say? I'm special. If you're done eating, this round of drinks is on me." "It's my turn to hear your stories," I said. We went through 3 more rounds until I heard everyone's story. Jennifer divorced because her spouse was a serial adulterer. Angelica's and Carol's marriages broke down due to irreconcilable differences. And Rose has been married to the best husband in the world for 26 years. She called him the best husband in the world several times, and each time the other 3 nodded in agreement. This is the man I should meet. The women had told me they had a girls' night out once a month, so my presence was something of a rule breaker for Rose. But Rose suggested that if I could bring her husband to the next meeting, I could come too if I wanted. The other 3 quickly agreed. "Can I bring a date?" I asked brazenly. A month later, the 6 of us met at the same restaurant. I met Sean, Rose's husband, and left the meeting thinking he really could be the best husband in the world. We hit it off instantly. The six of us continued to go out monthly, and I started dating the three single women as good friends. Sometimes the four of us would go out together. Sometimes I and one of the women would go on a date. Sometimes we would make love. After about a year, Angelica and I became exclusive. I was still good friends with Jennifer and Carol, but everyone understood that exclusivity meant exactly that. Although when the girls got together, the banter sometimes got rough, even for me. My children got used to Angelica quickly. It took a little longer for the in-laws to understand her. I realized that and didn't push it. Having a steady girlfriend meant their faint hopes of me reconciling with Tracy were fading quickly, but I think they saw the same thing in Angelica that I did, and since we had become such good friends, I think it was only a matter of time before they felt natural with her and started to show her why I thought so highly of them. After Angelica had been her in-laws' house about 6 times, Judy pulled me aside from the rest and said we needed to talk. She had a serious expression, like a heart attack, so I was a little worried that my marital happiness was about to explode. "Bobby, maybe I have no right to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway," she began. "How long have you been dating this woman? Don't you think it's time to put a ring on her finger before someone else gets the bright idea?" I did my best to match the serious expression on her face, but inside I was smiling from ear to ear. "When your ex-mother-in-law says that, well, I guess you're right. You're right, Mom. I need to tie that girl down. I guess I scared you a bit," I said. "Do it quickly, big guy," she replied. About 6 weeks later, I invited Angelica back to Maggiano's for her 47th birthday. I told her to dress up for the event, and she presented her version of a little black dress. Since Angelica couldn't conceive, she had no pregnancies, and her body looked like that of a 35-year-old woman. Her breasts hadn't sagged, and her belly was still firm. I know she also spent a lot of time at the gym, so it wasn't just the lack of children. The dress was about 2 inches above her knees and had a plunging neckline in the front to show off her beautiful 36E bust. My head was spinning all night, and I barely managed not to choke on my saliva during dinner. We both ordered cheesecake for dessert, and our waiter returned with a tray with 2 slices and a bottle of champagne. "We didn't order champagne," Angelica whispered to me. "We didn't." "I did," I whispered back. "It's to drink right after I put this ring on your finger." After talking to Judy, I went to my favorite jeweler, and he made me a custom diamond engagement ring. I thought he did an excellent job. Apparently, Angelica did too, who cried as soon as she saw it. I'm sure that amidst those sobs, there was a yes. We had a simple spring wedding. Terry was my best man, and Rose was the maid of honor. No, I didn't invite Tracy. Although I know it hurt Ron and Judy, I didn't consider my ex-wife a friend. The only time we were together was when it had to do with the children. We were cordial when we were together, but unlike some people who can get over a divorce and become friends, for me, it was impossible. I couldn't get over the lack of respect, and if you can't, it's unlikely you'll forgive. My children eventually forgave Tracy, and that's fine with me. She's their mother, but I don't ask about her, and my children don't talk about her voluntarily. The same with Ron and Judy. When we were all together, Angelica seemed to get along with Tracy. I don't mind that because Angelica is an independent person and can choose who she wants to be friends with. Again, we don't talk about it. Twice after the wedding, we met at Melissa's wedding and then at Terry's. On both occasions, I was a very proud father, and I wasn't going to let anything distract my children from their big days. The grandchildren arrived a couple of years after the wedding, and that's when I saw a side of Angelica I never thought I'd see. While Tracy and I were excited to be grandparents, Grandma Angel was simply thrilled. Apparently, she had a lot of maternal urges that needed to be satisfied, so to speak, and the grandchildren helped fill that desire. She was ridiculous. Tracy eventually remarried and then divorced again, and then married for the 3rd time and divorced for the 3rd time. Angelica told me she thought Tracy was looking for another version of me, but couldn't find one. She wanted me to promise her that I would never leave her. I replied, "I don't need to promise you that. I made a vow to you.